Now I have a special segment with reporters Bobby and Tristan as they interview Mr. Eymann, former principal of Morse.
I'm Robert English.
And I'm Tristan Mawyin. Joining us in the studio is Mr. Eymann, the second principal of Morse School. Welcome.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me. I'm anxious to be back and pleased, and it's great to be here. Thank you.
How long were you principal of Grantee Morse School?
I was principal here at Morse from July 1989 through June 2003, 14 years. A little history, I was a social studies teacher in the early 70s in the junior senior high, taught 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. And then after 6 years, they had a new position that was started called the dean's position, where I was selected to be the dean, and along with another teacher, Mr. Brazier at the time. And we shared this position. Half the time I taught social studies, three classes, and the rest of the time I was in the office handling administrative duties and discipline and things like that, supporting the principal. And Mr. Brazier did the same thing when I was in the classroom. So then, at the year after that, in 1978, I became assistant principal of the high school, where I was for 11 years, till 1989. And I worked with the high school kids for the first few years, and then I was given a choice to stay in the high school because they hired a second administrative assistant principal, or I could go back to the junior high and run that end of the building, which I opted to do. And so I was with the 7th, 8th, and 9th graders, and Mr. Brazier was in the high school, grades 9 through 12. But we worked together, and whenever they needed me, they called on Mr. Eymann to go to the high school to help out with things. So that was my career, and then in 1989, I was assigned to come to the Grant Morse School.
How were you selected principal?
Interesting question. As I said, I had a lot of experience dealing with the older students, and the position opened up here. Mr. B was retiring, Mr. Bonfiglio was retiring, and the board had to pick someone, and Mr. Lee, the superintendent, strongly recommended that I become the principal of the Grant Morse School. The board voted on it, Board of Education voted on it, and I was assigned to come to the school.
How did the school change from the time you started, from the time you ended?
Oh, that's a wide open question. There were a lot of changes. Let's start with when I first arrived here. I met the PTA president and the PTA, very active group, extremely supportive, and very much appreciated by the administration. First thing they wanted to do was get a new playground. Parents, grandparents might remember the old playground that was here. There was a rowboat out there, which was old and rotten, a few big old tires that kids could climb on, and things like that. So we got state-of-the-art program. The PTA hired these playground companies to come and give presentations, and we bought this playground, which we raised money for over the course of the whole year. In the spring of 1990, we built this playground, we being the parents, PTA, under the guidance of the playground company, and it was different from what you have here. The playground we had was built for safety. That was number one thing they wanted, and it wasn't too high, and there were no swings or any swinging tires or anything that could knock people over or hurt people. It was wide open, so one person, one monitor, or one teacher could stand at one end and see through the whole thing and make sure there was no misbehavior, no pushing or anything that could cause a person to be hurt. And the ground under it was sawdust, nice and soft if people fell. All these things were taken into consideration. There were a few others too, but don't recall. So that was the first major thing we did over the course of that year. We had a interesting, you can talk about the educational program, that changed a lot. We had what they called the ARL program, where it was mostly for teaching children to learn to read and write. So it was grades kindergarten through third grade, mostly. There was a segment that went into the older grades, but and one of the interesting things about that was the person who wrote the program, and we followed it, was the Board of Education adopted this program, was that students had to learn to write cursive rather than write in print. So when they learned to write letters, it was cursive C with the flow, and the letters were connected to make words, etc. Not like print, where one of the ideas about it was cursive had a flow, like scribbling. Print, you had to be very precise and make it and stop and then dot the I and cross the T and so forth. Not with cursive. There was a flow to it, and so they thought it was easier. And also, when you learn to read and write, your eyes go from left to right across the page. That's the way it is with cursive. You write. And so that was a major thing because there were a lot of opponents of cursive. They didn't think it was right. They said, well, kids read print and books. They should be writing with print rather than writing with cursive. So it was a controversy. And eventually, of course, we got rid of the cursive in kindergarten. It was a very specific program where teachers were told what to teach, letter combinations like, let's say, and so you learn the word and put M in front of it. What do you have? Man. Or a P in front of it? Pan. Or a C in front of it? Can. And you know all those words automatically just from knowing that root and. Okay? So that was the theory on which the kids were taught to read at the time. There were brain words. Interesting. Words that you couldn't rhyme with anything, like the word the. What does the rhyme with?
Huh?
Nothing.
So there were brain words that students just had to memorize. So that's where they were taught to read back then. That program, I think, went down the path of they got rid of it, and so now we have other programs to read. Other changes. Oh, the computer system. When I came here, there was one computer in the whole building. It was in the office. Mrs. Grant, the secretary, who I like to consider my administrative assistant because she had a hand on everything. She knew all the kids, all the parents, what to do, when to do it, was always guiding me on what to do, especially when I started. So she was such a critical part. But she was the only person who had a computer and knew how to run it in school, at least that we knew of. And eventually, of course, teachers started to be taught the computer. Eventually, one computer was put in a classroom, one at a time. And then after a few years, the district really got on board and had each of the elementary schools as well as the secondary schools, have a computer room put in, where there were 30 computers in the room. And in this school, at the time, this was like 2000 or 1995, 1993, something like that. There was room in the school because we had a decrease in the population because we transferred students to the Cahill School, and the room across from the library next door was the computer room. That big classroom with 30 computers in it. What a nice computer room we had here. That was new. we had to have somebody to run it. So we hired a teaching assistant who knew computers, and now we have Mrs. Maines, of course, who runs the computer room, which is down in the end room now, and down the hall. But and Mrs. Maines was a great person because she was an IBM programmer before, and she worked for IBM, so she knew computers better than anybody in the whole school. Maybe Mrs. Grant was pretty good too. And so that was really a major change. Other changes, one year, I'll tell you, we had, it was very crowded here because the Cahill School in town by the Olympic Diner was being renovated. They had to close it down. So what did they do with the kids that year? Where did all the kids go? They had to divide them, all the Cahill kids up, and send them to the different schools around the district. So what did we get? We got all the 5th and 6th graders here at Morse. All the kids, they were all bussed out all year long to this school, and wow, we were crowded. We had like, oh gosh, 560, 70 kids in the school that year, and everything was crammed up. Couldn't do, and so there were a lack of classrooms, so what did they do? They took the, this is interesting, they took the art room and the music room, and they made them classrooms because and so what did they do? Oh, the art teacher was upset. She came to me. She said, what are you going to do? How am I going to teach? How am I going to bring all my art supplies to different classes every 35 minutes or every 40 minutes? I can't do it. And so I thought about it. I went home to my shop, and I built a cart. I called it the art cart. And it was about this long and this wide, and it had big wheels on it, and it had a shelf on it, so Mrs. Rockwood could come, she was the art teacher, could stuff all of her materials for that day onto the art cart and wheel it from class to class. And so that's how but the art cart had a problem. It had wooden wheels. And so, you know, wooden wheels going down the hall, they create a rumbling sound. So every time Mrs. Rock would go from class to class, you hear this noise going down the hall. And so after that year, all the Cahill students went back to their school, and that's when they also took some of our population and put it to the Cahill school. And the art cart was put in a closet or in a garage or somewhere and disappeared. I forgot all about it. Then, during my retirement, guess what they rolled out? The art cart. They rolled it out and said, here's your art cart, Mr. Eymann, take it away. And so I took it home. I didn't have the heart to break it up or destroy it or burn it up, so I have my tools stacked on it at home, so I'm still using the art cart. Other changes, now of course you have the elevator here. That wasn't here, but that came after I had left. I could go on and on with changes that took place, changes in program, changes in staff. The staff is, like I said, a senior staff, and many of them were going to retire, and so I had the opportunity to hire a lot of new, young, energetic teachers, many of whom are still here, I'm proud to say.
How does it make you feel to look back at 50 years of Morse School?
Well, I'm extremely proud of the school. Wherever I go, people ask me, well, what did you do for your career? And I said I had the best job at the end of my career. I was in elementary school in one of the best schools in New York State. It's got great kids, respectful, mostly well-behaved. Kids make mistakes like we all do. But overall, it's a great school, an excellent staff, and a nice facility. And on top of that, you have very, very supportive parents, which makes this place all the better. And so I was very fortunate to be part of this school for 14 years, and I just am so proud of it still.
What was your greatest achievement as principal of Morse School?
as I reflect upon it, I was extremely proud. There were a lot of things I were proud of. Some things that we did, you know, special things, but I think the achievement, which I was most proud of, when I came here, the school was doing well academically, but by the time I left, it was the best school with academic standards. We were, the state tests were giving, that was another change that took place when I was here. First it was fourth graders all had to take state tests. Now what do they have? They're fourth, fifth, sixth grade state tests, right? There were none when I came here. Just, we gave an Iowa test in December or January, you know, a standardized test. But now you have all these tests, and our school was ranked very high when I was here, and I was proud, extremely proud of the teachers here and the students for that reason.
How does it make you feel to be a second principal of Morse School?
Well, like I said, it's just, at the time I never thought of it. I thought, well, I guess I did. Mr. B was the principal and nobody else, and I came here and I said, wow, how am I going to keep up to him? And I was told by a superintendent, just do what you think you should and you'll be all right. And of course, when I came, I met with Mr. B, and he said, you don't have to change anything. Everything's running very smoothly, etc. In other words, the school was not in crisis. There was nothing chaotic about it. Just had to come over and do what Mrs. Grant told me to do to start, and learn the job, and be myself, and make the decisions, and be supportive of everybody, and do my best to make the place run smoothly.
What did you learn from Mr. Bonfiglio?
Well, that is an interesting question. It's better to say, what did I inherit from Mr. Bonfiglio? Because he had everything so set up. All I had to do is adopt things. One thing, though, I did learn, the first time I came here, I was given several hours to meet with him, and it was at the end of the school year, and he said, Mr. Eymann, first thing you're going to have to do is do the schedule for next year. And he says, and I had done the schedules for the high school, so I knew scheduling pretty much, but it was much different because we had teachers rotating in the school, like the art teachers and the music teachers, etc. So you had to fit them into the school day when they were here, and then get every teacher their prep every day, and had to follow the lunch system and so forth. So it was tricky, and so he explained all that to me and told me what to be careful of and where mistakes could be made. I remember very clearly him guiding me through how to do the scheduling, and Mr. Dykeman will tell you, it's like putting a puzzle together, putting all the classes together and fitting everything in. And let's see, but overall, he was very supportive, and then whenever he came back, he didn't want to intrude, but he would give a little advice if asked, and he was a pleasure to follow.
What did you pass down to Mr. Turner?
What did I pass down to Mr. Turner? Basically, what Mr. B. Turner did to me, I told him all about scheduling, because it's a challenge to do the first time, and I gave him all the information on the staff and all the problems and areas that he should be concerned about. But basically I said, this place is running by itself. You don't have to change anything much to start with. As you see, as you go on, you can, make changes and improve things, but it runs the way it is, and I offered him help whenever he needed it also.
Looking around the school, what was the greatest addition that you saw?
Well, at the time, I was very pleased with the expansions of the physical, the facility with the library and the computer rooms, and of course, I was pleased with the way the place was operating when I left.
What was your first day like as principal?
Oh, wow. I remember that very clearly. Now, I was used to working with the secondary students, right? And secondary students are much more mature, and you'd have to treat them respectfully. They expected to be respectfully. And what shocked me is, you know, elementary teachers will kind of be hands-on and touch, you know, or guide students. High school kids would say, "Get your hands off me!" You know, you don't touch them or anything. And at the elementary school, I came into the kindergarten, and well, first of all, I found the kids so respectful and so eager to help. In the secondary school, the older kids have what they call the code. Somebody threw a sandwich on the floor, you go in and ask the table in the high school, and I said, "Who threw the sandwich?" I don't know, nobody saw it, you know. You come in here, who threw the sandwich on the floor? 8 kids, he did it! I was shocked at how honest and helpful the kids were, you know, and I said, wow, this is great. But then it's back to this hands-on things. I told, you know, at the beginning of the school year, I always have a faculty meeting, we all did, and one of the things I said, we don't touch students, you know, and this is where it was coming from the high school. Well, the first thing I did was walk into the kindergarten. Mrs. Bono was the teacher, and she says, the first day I came in, Mrs. Bono said to me, to Mr. Eymann, she says, everybody now, may I have your attention? This is Mr. Eymann, our new principal. And I said, well, hi, everybody. And I'm there talking, and one little girl came up and walked up to me and started hugging me. And her face is right on my lap. And I'm going like this, and I was so upset because here she was hugging me, and I'm not supposed to touch her, and I wasn't used to that. So this was what shocked me about the elementary, how friendly the children are, and how respectful they are, and so. And let's see, other things about the change. It was just working with the younger kids, the very supportive parents. By the time students get to the junior and senior high school, parents are more or less letting their children do their things, making their decisions, and I just think that the elementary parents are really, really supportive in this school anyway. The thousands and thousands of dollars they've raised over this past 50 years, probably the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Just that one year we raised $30,000 for the playground. So and every year this PTA does things that people don't know. They give teachers stipends. I think they still give them stipends, money to buy supplies, maybe $50 or $100 or whatever it is. Whenever anyone has any event or something, they're always there to help and so forth. So I just can't recognize those people enough, the PTA, every year.
What was your first day like as principal?
Well, I think I covered part of that, going into that kind of kindergarten classroom. Of course, the staff was, didn't know, I had met them, but they didn't know me. And the first day, of course, you have your big principals meeting with the staff. And, of course, mine went on longer than I wanted. But because teachers are anxious to get in their classroom and get things set up and so forth. Who wants to listen to the principal? But I had all my expectations because one of my my guidelines was you have to tell them to make sure to cover yourself. For instance, if I didn't tell a teacher, don't touch students, and they tell them, I didn't tell them, and they go touch students, they said, well, you didn't tell me that. So I go through everything. It takes a lot of time. But let's see, the rest of the first day, teachers were very supportive. We just try to get through it, and and get everybody home safely. I know that's a big deal with the young ones, getting them on the right buses and so forth. And it went smoothly. And by the end of the week, one of the teachers came in. She sat down, may I talk to Mr. I? I said, sure, what's going on? She says, just want to tell you, you're different from Mr. B. That's what she said. But we like you. So I said, all right. Well, I felt good about that. So the first day was kind of routine, actually, but it was a new experience.
Thank you, Mr. Eymann.
You're welcome, and thank
Thank
you.
you.
Now back to Clinton for more Inside Just Print It.
Thank you for joining us on Inside Just Print, produced by JPI TV. Don't forget to Google us, watch us, like us, and share us. This is Clinton Sussman, Editor-in-Chief. Have a great day.
Google us, like us, share us, it's a JPI TV.